So a lot of times the signs that you're heading into high conflict divorce will be there's a lot of emotions that are being filed. It will also be sometimes there will be conflict between the parties, even times that the police may be called. So a lot of times when you start seeing those things, you can tell that you're headed into a high conflict divorce. Sometimes can be both parties, or sometimes it may be one party. And sometimes it's difficult when you have one party who's the one causing the conflict, and you've got the other party who's wanting to get things resolved. That person wanting to get things resolved sometimes doesn't have much of a choice but to go to court and fight. So we'll see a lot of things. We see a lot of controlling behavior sometimes. We see a lot of times threats of abuse, or threats to use the children in ways that parties shouldn't be using the children, as in manipulating the children and things like that. So sometimes it can be hard to deal with false accusations in the divorce because you've got to prove it. And one thing that you can do is we look at, what are the text messages between the parties? Or it might get to a point where conversations have to be recorded so you can back up what's actually happening. And then there's other times that we have to look at things such as bank records, cell phone records. So a lot of times there are records that will reveal things. We might have to look at subpoenaing cell phone records to see where a person was at a certain time. So there's just different ways to deal with that. So yeah, so if you're saying, like, for example, if somebody was physically abusive to you, there's a few things. A lot of times now there's cameras everywhere. The neighbor's camera may have picked it up, a street camera may have picked it up, your camera may have picked it up. But then there's also obviously physical evidence. So if you have been abused, you definitely need to be taking pictures and documenting things. Protecting your mental health in a high conflict situation, and this is just not for high conflict situations. I always advise anyone going through a divorce that's a life-changing event. It's always good to go talk to somebody, to get a therapist, to get a psychologist. So I think that's one of the main things that you need to do when you're going through a divorce, whether it's a simple divorce or even especially in a high conflict divorce. You need somebody that you can talk to who's a trained professional. As your attorneys, we are not trained professionals to provide mental health treatment. We've seen a lot. We've done a lot. We can give you some guidance, but I think you need a trained professional to help you do that. And then also there's other outlets. Obviously exercise is huge. Eating right is big. Having hobbies and ways that you can, and things that you can do to get your mind off of that conflict that's going on. Sometimes, and it goes back to the example, a lot of times I've seen cases where it's one party that's the high conflict that's causing the conflict, and it's the other party who's not. And the party who's not, sometimes they don't have much of a choice but to fight and but to stand up for themselves. But a lot of times too, though, when you get two people who are being high conflict with each other, it's always nice if they can step back from it, look at it, especially look at it from a financial standpoint, because a lot of times people will spend a lot of money that could go towards their children, could go towards their children's college education, that's being spent fighting with each other in that divorce. So dealing with a high conflict divorce can be very tedious. It can be very time consuming. And that's really where you need someone who's very knowledgeable about the law. So if you think you're dealing with or going to deal with a high conflict divorce, please feel free to reach out to us at Mandy Hancock Law.